Guten Tag, WAP. This is Mr. Liniger. Let's make history today as we go over Unit 4, Day 18. Today we're going to talk about the Middle East. Specifically, we'll talk about the rise of fundamentalism and terrorism in some parts of those countries. Let's get started with our daily punishment first. The baseball player was such a bad sport. He stole third base and then he just went home. Sports joke. Your key terms for today: the PLO, Hezbollah, Al Qaeda, ISIS, the Taliban, the Islamic Brotherhood, the Iranian Revolution, the Ayatollah Khomeini, the Iran Iraqi War, the Gulf War, Arab Springs. We're going to go over the Iranian Revolution and its effects, fundamentalism and terrorism in the Middle East, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. All right, so let's talk about Islamic resurgence. The Cold War is going to split the Arab Muslim world. Pan-Arabism, which Nasser was really for, we talked about that last time, is really not going to materialize during this time. However, there will be a revival of Islamicism, which is like fundamentalist Islamic beliefs, very strict, based on Sharia law, that embraces terrorism to cleanse Islam and kill the people that they feel that are polluting Islam. Like, it's very anti-Western. It reasserts Islamic values in Muslim politics, resentment at European and American societies. The extremists embrace jihad, holy war, duty to defend the Islam world from attack. Terrorism is justified. And there are going to be terrorist groups that are created during this time. The Islamic Brotherhood is created all over the world. They originally claimed to be a charitable organization, but they do funnel funds towards terrorism. You have groups like Hezbollah, which is a terrorist organization in Lebanon, the Taliban, which is Islamic organization in Afghanistan. The Taliban is the one that supported Al Qaeda. They're the ones that America invaded the Taliban after 9/11. The Palestinian Liberation Organization, and the most recent one, ISIS. They all have very weird names. None of these names frighten me. ISIS is an Egyptian sex goddess. The Taliban sounds like something you would wear at IKEA. You would sit on it. It's like a chair. Hezbollah sounds like hummus. It sounds yummy. And the Islamic Brotherhood sounds like a Care Bear. So these names do not frighten me. Anyways, let's talk about Iran. Iran is going to have religious revivalism and rejection of the West. Before 1979, Iran had no modern infrastructure. It did have a somewhat Western educated middle class. Very little, though. A lot of those people that were educated were actually banned from the country. The leader of Iran was the Shah. He was not very religious. He did not observe religious rituals. He alienated religious leaders. He was seen as too friendly with America. America was the one that put the Shah in power to begin with. They were a puppet state. He was a puppet of the United States during the Cold War. In 1979, the Shah is going to fled to the United States. The revolution is going to oust the Shah dynasty of Iran. This is the Iranian Revolution. The followers of the major priest in Iran, who was previously exiled, is going to come back to his country, the Ayatollah Khomeini. He's going to preach rejection of the West, hatred of Western beliefs, terrorism, Islamic fundamentalism, extreme Shia beliefs. He wants to eradicate Western culture and economic influences. His regime will support Islamic extremists and terrorists around the globe. In the 1979, 1980, one of the things they do is they capture some American students in Iran. They hold them hostage for almost like a year. The Iranian hostage crisis. America is unable to get them out until the Iranians release them. It kind of shows the diminishing prestige of America at that time. Iran is considered one of the United States' major enemies in the Middle East. Let's talk about Afghanistan. Communist Russia is going to invade Afghanistan in 1980. The Afghani rebels are going to launch a 9-year guerrilla warfare, followed between the Soviets and Muslim guerrillas. Russia will withdraw in 1989, leaving the Mujahideen and the Taliban in control of a radical Muslim state. The Taliban and the Mujahideen were the Muslims fighting against the Soviets. What's going to happen is America, this is during the Cold War, so America is going to give weapons, and the CIA is going to give training to the Mujahideen, to the Taliban. One of the people we helped train is Osama bin Laden. At the time, he was an ally, but, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and he sure does that. America does, like I mentioned, arm anti-Soviet guerrillas in the 1980s. In 2002, it was found out after 9/11 that the Taliban was supporting the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization. They were protecting them. America is going to invade Afghanistan in 2002 after the Taliban had supported the September 11th attacks. A pro-Western regime will be installed in Afghanistan after we defeat the Afghani armies. There will be terrorist attacks against the U.S. Army in Afghanistan. And just recently, in 2021, America finally pulled out the rest of their army from Afghanistan. It's like our whole invasion of Afghanistan has kind of been successful. The state was overthrown, but like there were continued to be America was in Afghanistan for like 20 years. There was continuous terrorist attacks, and when America left Afghanistan, the Taliban is still the government in charge. This idea was originally started by Donald Trump, and Joe Biden planned to pull out the U.S. soldiers on September 11th, 2021. Let's talk about Iraq. Iraq will be an ally with America at first. Iraq will go to war with Iran. America will give weapons to Iraq. We'll actually give poison gas to Iraq. Saddam Hussein, who was the leader, will then use the poison gas against his own people. Ugh. The war will drag on until 1988. 1 million people will be killed. After this, Iraq is going to invade a small Middle Eastern country that produced a lot of oil, Kuwait. Saddam thought he can get away with it. America was not happy with that. Kuwait was an oil ally. So America is going to launch an alliance to invade Kuwait and to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait. This is called the First Gulf War. It was led by the United States and the United Nations forces. He will be pushed out. They drive him out in 1991. The UN is going to do sanctions, but it will fail to disarm Iraq. In 2003, George Bush Jr., his father was the one that invaded Kuwait the first time to get at Iraq. George W. Bush thought that his dad should have gone into Iraq and taken Saddam out of power. In 2003, he's going to say that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, and he is going to lead a coalition of U.S. allies, like a couple countries, really not that many, to invade Iraq. In retrospect, years later, we have not found the weapons of mass destruction. Saddam was not following through with the UN sanctions, but there were no smoking clouds or smoking mushrooms or nuclear bombs or poisonous things in Iraq. Our rationale for invading Iraq was not accurate. The U.S. is going to occupy Iraq. They're going to have a democratic representative government to try to form. However, just like Afghanistan, there's going to be civil war, the guerrilla warfare, terrorism. ISIS is going to become a new terrorist organization that's going to thrive in Iraq and Afghanistan. And just like Afghanistan, America has started slowly pulling their soldiers out of Iraq. They kind of have a functional government. They're kind of okay with America. But this war has also been not extremely successful. Lastly, let's talk about Arab Springs. Arab Springs is a general term for a series of protests that happened all over the Middle East. Some of them were civil wars, some of them were disruptions. It happened from 2010 to 2013. These little civil wars were caused by corruption in government, inequality of wealth, famine. They're going to affect Libya, Egypt, Syria, Tunisia, Algeria, Iraq, Kuwait, Morocco, Sudan. These revolutions will revolutionize Middle Eastern politics. They will not lead to liberal democracies. They will not cause just all the Middle East to become liberal democracies, but they will change the governmental structure in some of these countries. And in some of these countries after Arab Springs, the governments will be a little bit more honest functioning. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. We will go over Asia for the next 2 videos. Until next time, deuces, deuces, deuces.